Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome in our midst Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi ji, Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs and Culture, Government of India. We are so glad she could take time out of her extremely busy schedule to be with us. With her on stage, we have Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe, President ICCR, and Shri Kumar Tuhin, Director General of ICCR. I request Shri Abhay Kumar, Deputy Director General ICCR, to kindly extend a floral welcome to the Honorable Minister. I request Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe, President of ICCR, to speak a few words by way of welcoming the Honorable Minister.
Union Minister of State looking after external affairs and culture, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi ji, Kumar ji, and friends. So right at the beginning, we started with Ayush, because health is so supreme, and therefore we discussed Ayush and Ayurveda related things because the minister concerned was present amongst us. And now we have somebody who is representing the Ministry of External Affairs, with which all of us are naturally associated, and of course the core Ministry of Culture. So I'm really happy to have Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi ji amongst us. I'm thankful to her for taking out time. Simply as a matter of information, if I may mention over here, that ma'am, this is a first of its kind gathering of academics, majorly heads of departments, and more than 39 countries have been represented over here. We have representatives from Turkey, Tajikistan, Spain, Netherlands, Nepal, Italy, Malaysia, Mexico, Hungary, Israel, Thailand, China, Slovenia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Belgium, Croatia, Germany, several other countries, including Sweden, Ukraine, Australia, and the largest delegation comes from our very old friend, that is Sri Lanka. Some 17, 18 people are there. So welcome to all of you. Welcome to ma'am. Ma'am, we will be discussing in the afternoon session in groups as to how we face the challenges effectively, because challenges are everywhere. And tomorrow we will be discussing in a dedicated session what kind of career opportunities we really can think about for the products of these very old and important departments teaching Indic knowledge systems over there. So with these words, if I may invite ma'am, kindly address us.
Thank you very much, Vinayji, Kumar Tuhin, ladies and gentlemen. I can only express that I'm so happy and pleased to be here amongst all of you, and grateful that this exercise has been undertaken for the simple reason that end of the day, people like us also need intellectual support and backup. And that intellectual support and backup can only come from people who know their subject, who are researching, who are working, who are constantly in touch. And this is the group which will be a guiding force for all of us. The fact is that whenever we are discussing culture, we understand that culture is something which connects all of us. So when we see someone who's a practitioner of Buddhism, no matter what the color of the skin is, no matter what the color of the hair or eyes are, but the fact somebody is practicing yoga, somebody is practicing Buddhism, somebody is chanting one or two shloks which you understand, there's an establishment of an immediate connection. And with that immediate connection is the human psychology. That when culture connects, so does your policy, and alignment of thought happens. And that alignment of thought is what leads to productive work, because it's a matter of trust and faith that further sees itself in the depth of understanding, coming from the same roots, having the same mindset. And thus, your foreign policy gets very easily impacted, and to work around is very, very simple. In nutshell, the culture, the external affairs, all become internalized by a person's personality. Some people put you off, some people immediately attract you. And the reason is, with some people, you feel a cultural affinity, a connect. And that connect in human aspirations, in human work, in humans' endeavor to reach a peaceful solution to a problem, it's directly impacted. Whether it's Buddhism or it's Indic knowledge systems or it's Indology, it's languages, the more one learns, the more one understands the ancient, most formal language is Sanskrit. And if Sanskrit is the base in one prototype or the other prototype, how is it and why is it that Sanskrit is not the lingua franca of the world, but other languages are? I have nothing against those languages, except the fact that those languages came much later. So, somewhere the emphasis to not lose the knowledge which in the past existed in the Sanskrit, whether, because end of the day, language is nothing but a tool to communicate. So, tool to communicate, if we give up on a language like Sanskrit, we are giving up thousands of years of research and work which has been expressed in this language when other languages in formal sense did not exist. If we do not ensure enough work on this language or the ancient script, a few thousand-year work will get lost as compared to few hundred years work. So all I feel that the thousands of years of human wisdom which exists through the language, which is communicated through the language by our ancestors, needs to be preserved, conserved, and worked upon. And if we work upon those thought processes and those subjects, it will only help us find solutions to the pluricultural crisis that we all are facing at this point in time. Coming from my ancient roots, our ancient roots, if I may say, we always knew that the circle of life moves ups and down. There are always ups and downs. So few civilizations rise, few civilizations vanish, and few civilizations have shown the resilient character. And with that resilient character and those who change, but they don't change enough to give up everything from the past, we need to have that continuity. At that continuity, if we go back to the Sanskrit roots, if we go back to the knowledge systems, definitely we will find far more in common in the world than the differences. Everybody is connected. And going back to the thought which was expressed as a tagline for G20, Vasudev Kutumbakam, world is one family. The moment this thought of one family comes into the people's head and mind, I am so sure finding solution to the problem will be much easy. We went through a very difficult phase that was COVID-19, the pandemic, and we believe there's another kind of virus which has already come about. So pandemics are something which, with today's connectivity, are finding expression far, far, far faster than it would have been in the past, because communication is fast, travel is fast, spreading is fast, and so have the solutions to be fast. And the solution in the past lay in something like the kadas of Ayush, the Ayurveda also showcased that when you're dealing with these kinds of issues, the only thing which works is your own immunity. How to boost immunity, how to work around those diseases, how to find solution to mental peace, the issues of mental health, which is plaguing the world today, which is plaguing our youth, which is plaguing the future of the world, and simple practices of meditation, simple practice of yoga can change those mindsets. And whenever I look around and I find so many countries, youth, people, as a mother, I can say that no mother, no father would want their children to become terrorists. Nobody, no teacher would want their student to become terrorists. But terrorism is a reality which we all are faced with. Why and how these youngsters become terrorists? If we go back to the Indian system of philosophy or understanding, we know that these chemicals in the brains are acted upon, and these chemicals in the brain can be settled by right practices, because end of the day, whether creative thought or a destructive thought, both are erupting out of the same mind. And if we train the mind right, the negative thoughts will disappear and positive thoughts will take place. And positive thoughts with the same brain can lead to many new innovations, find solutions to the problems, or the negative thoughts which lead to terrorism. Choice is ours, which way to go, and how to train those minds, how to train the youngsters, whether we want repeat actions of the past and certain chants which can make a person calm and help that person achieve the highest grace which this universe needs, or we want the most destructive form and terrorism to take over. So finality is that Indic knowledge systems, which we take a lot of pride in, everybody sitting in the room has that system ingrained in their system. You're all far more knowledgeable than I am, because you're academically intellectual class. I look forward to all the inputs which you have for people like us, how we can bring youth together on getting this knowledge. Because more I see, more I find that these systems are becoming more and more difficult on one side. On the other side, more and more youth are moving away from the basic foundation on which this civilization has existed for a very long time, which are positive thoughts. And usually I give the examples of artists, culture experts, because if whether somebody who's a textile creator, or somebody who's a painter, or somebody who's a singer or a musician, you look at any of the artists, the battles are always internal, because all these artists are fighting with themselves to make their art perfect. And that is the spiritual ingredient in their personality, that they, if somebody is painting a rose, that they want that rose to look like a real rose, with all the depth, the color, the shine, the brightness, the combinations, as close as it can get to the perfect rose which we all see in our through our eyes. And the artist will have its own creative impact on that. So an artist will never be a terrorist, because their battles are all internal with themselves, perfecting their art, perfecting their voice, perfecting their skill of playing drums or music or whatever. So how do we get more and more people to stay positive? How do we get more and more people to have inward looking, making ourselves better? I think that's a struggle all of us have faced at some point or the other, by developing an understanding that we are not perfect beings, but we try and be perfect in whatever we do. Unfortunate part that we are not able to transfer that learning, that wisdom to our youth. I think this forum is a great forum where all the intellectual and academic class comes together to understand where the issues lie, how we can broaden the spectrum of our outreach, how deeply we are connected, how to secure language, teachings, wisdom, so that more and more people become peaceful and find solutions to the problems which the world is faced with today. All those scientists, all those artists have to be brought together. And I also say that if we read deeply, whether it's the language Sanskrit or it's the knowledge which Sanskrit brings on board through Vedic science, it will have impact on history, it will have impact on governance, it will have impact on the correct behavior, the right input in our relationships, how a king has to deal with the subjects, and the king's office is the office, which is an elected office and not necessarily a inherited office, successive office. And I mean, I have nothing against the patriarchs, but the fact is that these were all knowledge system which also depict that democracy is not something which we have found 200, 300 years ago, but democracy was very much part of human nature. And through the Vedas, we have described Ganatantra and the office of king itself. So a whole lot of knowledge about governance, civics, mathematics, astrophysics, medicine, conduct, good behavior, relationships, all that wisdom will be lost. So it's the duty of all of us in the room to spread the message of positivity in a pluri-crisis situation. And the deeper we go, the deeper we learn. We also learn how deeply connected we are, how deeply our thoughts have been aligned and associated. The right thinking people were always contesting against the wrong thinking people. The moment has come, the moment is yet to arrive, but we are in the direction where right thoughts have to take the prime position and guide the world at large. And I'm grateful that this exercise has been undertaken. People have been brought together. I look forward to your inputs as the intellectual and academically sound class to guide us all to bring forth the propositions which the world needs to listen to and protect, preserve, and conserve our heritage. Thank you very much. Jai Bharat.
Ladies and gentlemen, if anybody would like to ask some questions to the Honorable Minister, she'd be happy to answer them. Any questions? Suggestions are also very welcome. Yes, the gentleman there.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Ahmed Al-Qazi from Egypt, and I'm happy to be a part of this Knowledge India Convention. In fact, to listen to and heard about the digital India, I was expecting as a linguistic and I'm a teacher or professor for the language Hindi and Urdu, that any online course to help us to teach our students, because we don't have this, direct information with the Indian people to talk in Hindi or Urdu and all these things. So we are expecting that online courses, intermediate or whatever it is, to help us and help our students to learn Hindi or Urdu.
So
thank you.
The information I have is that we have already started a course with Indira Gandhi Open University, and that is an online, very basic course, but enough for Duolingo kind of work. But the certificate course we will be offering very soon. So we are already working on that. Thank you.
Left.
My name is Heinz-Werner Wessler. I'm from Uppsala in Sweden, teaching Indology. We have, over a certain period of time, discussed in several circles, like the Vaishvik Hindi Parivar, this question of the role of Hindi in the future world of India becoming much more important now. United Nations question of the official language, whether Hindi could be official language in the United Nations, etc. You're aware of all this. So we believe that we need some kind of incentive of an international examination system for Hindi, definition what is A1, A2, B1, B2 level, etc. in Hindi, and the examinations equivalent to this. Do you see a chance to develop this? At the same time, the question whether Hindi as a foreign language, a whole study program somewhere in India could be introduced, for example, Delhi University, BA, MA, postdoc, doc and postdoc. So on all levels, which is important for when we think about the future of Hindi in the world.
Thank you very much. So far as universities, formal education is concerned, we already run those classes and ICCR runs those programs. We have many classes, including Agra. We run Hindi teaching programs at many levels. But the formal online course is something which we are starting. And we have already started a primary course, which is familiarizing with the language, just to hear and listen and get used to basic things. And then the formal online course is what we are starting, but other courses where person can come and learn here, they are all in place. They are already there. With many countries, we have ICCR scholarship program, we have iTech program, we have plenty of programs under which people can come, bureaucrats can come, mid-career trainees can come, and we will be happy to support them with the language skills. So Wardha University is, as per the information I have, Wardha University has already worked on a course which is Hindi for foreigners, and we are taking that forward also. The information could be gotten from the DG and other officials from the ICCR.
Yes, we are very thankful to you given us to this kind of opportunity. In Sri Lanka, we have many Sanskrit department. We are teaching Sanskrit, Indian philosophy, these things. But unfortunately, our students and our teachers, is very fluently we can't speak in Sanskrit and also write in skill. How to get the help to develop these things? But we have knowledge about that in Sri Lanka. Many students also we have, but in speaking and writing is sometimes poor. That's why.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure Vinayji will be able to help you with that, because we have an organization called Sanskrit Bharati. I have been planning to do their course like your student, but very basic level. I studied Sanskrit for 4-5 years in school. I can read, understand a bit of it, but speech is a problem. So Sanskrit Bharati does these courses of speech, and they train people to speak within a few months, 2-3 months. You get the fluency if you have the basic knowledge. And I'm sure Vinayji is telling that he's invited them here as well. And I'm very sure that if all of you put together, take a small class, everyone can speak. They are so good with their teaching methodology. So it'll be nice. Maybe ICCR can come up with a program, send 1 or 2 teachers to Sri Lanka and set up a small group of people who speak in Sanskrit. It'll be very, very interesting to, very good experiment to have also. Yes, ma'am.
With the mic is just coming to you, sir.
I'm Idamar Theodore from Israel, and I find interest in India in teaching Bhagavad Gita as philosophy. And I want to ask about the state of promoting this idea of Bhagavad Gita as philosophy from a humanistic, Indological point of view.
Thank you very much. Bhagavad Gita, every Indian, officially, not necessarily officially, but unofficially reads and gets to be impressed with at one point or the other. And teachings, again, can have multiple layers, multiple meanings. Not necessarily the Oppenheimer has described it, but far more deeper and far more exciting meanings. But Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, if I can remember from my childhood, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan runs classes on Gita. Several others run classes on Gita. And there used to be a competition for school kids from Gita, where you could, it could be a recitation competition, it could be a writing competition, it could be a competition that which slok comes from which chapter, like that. So if one had to, you don't become perfect, but at the same time, familiarization with Gita is something which is there with most of us. How deeply one chooses to go into will be a very individualistic choice, but I take your point that if we can, those who learn Sanskrit, this is also part of the core curriculum. We do have this, or maybe one chapter in which there will be some important shloks, etc. So somewhere or the other, we do have experience with Gita and we do teach, but I mean, it's very much part of the system. Ma'am, you were saying something, and we will close with this question, sir, because Vinay is looking at his watch, so we must keep in time.
Thank you for the opportunity as the last question or a suggestion. So my name is Dr. Shweta Sinha Deshpande. I represent FICCI and I come from Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts. I'm the director there. I think coming from a background which is very interdisciplinary, both in my training as well as where I work, I feel that while it's very important to bring in Indology, Sanskrit, Yoga, Buddhist studies together, one important aspect would be to bring in a curriculum framework which allows all of these programs to study India more than just one part of it. So bringing in a more curricular frame which will allow an understanding of the history, the archaeology, the political science, both in the traditional form as well as the contemporary. What that will do is it will help young individuals who are studying in these programs take their learning to the workspace. And I think that has been one of the challenges that we've been talking about. So that's just something that I would like to share.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Fantastic suggestion. And I'm sure we already see the drawbacks. I mean, and just to mention my very personal experience, 2-3 days back, I visited one museum in Europe. And many arts and artifacts were kept in different place, not assigned to India, and not even knowing India's heritage in metallurgy. I mean, we were so good that few century BC, you have already produced a non-rustable iron pillar, and what in modern times, language, assigned nanotechnology of infusing iron with carbon and making steel is given to one or the other country, but many centuries before that, Indians had already done it, and Indian daggers and swords were sold across the globe because they were of fine quality steel. But unless you know Sanskrit, unless you know this archival material, or you have greater understanding of this, one would not be in a position to even curate artifacts which one is supposed to. And unfortunately, that's my experience. Wherever I go, I mean, I'm not going with the intention to find faults, but I'm going with the intention to develop greater understanding. I find that nobody is to be blamed, but we need to develop more and more understanding of language. And sometimes experts who are more learned people like you need to be on board while others may be curating those objects. And others may need some basic knowledge of the language, but that's what is missing. If I point out, it'll look, it's a political person who's pointing out, and what's her academic qualification? What's her claim to fame, other than politics or law? But definitely I feel the academic people need to be on board even when it comes to segregating collections in museums, finding connections within civilizations, finding ways that how ancients were all connected far more globally than we are today. Because you need visas to travel from one place to the other. Earlier you could just go wherever you wanted. So people did go wherever they wanted, and people did influence each other in far more deeper ways than we are doing today. So world comparatively is far more divided in modern times, and maybe you people can come up with a paper on that in addition to your suggestion. I see a lot of people who are engineers from some of our best institutes, and again, academically very, very sound in what they do. They have developed very deep understanding of Sanskrit and even Indian history. And I'm very impressed with some of those people who are working in an interdisciplinary manner. Many professionals who come from a different discipline but are working on subjects which are connected with history, Indology, in ancient languages, Brahmi script, Kharosthi script. I mean, for all of you, it may not be a shock or a surprise, but for me, it was a surprise. We only read what Kharosthi is as school kids. We knew there's a script which is called Kharosthi. We knew it's a script called Brahmi, but not many knew, like I didn't know till few years ago, that both scripts come from India. And one is from right to left and other is from left to right. So you can understand what I'm emphasizing. The global languages which we use today can be divided on script 2 lines, right to left and left to right. And if you track the root, both come from the same root, and that is found in India. I think people need to compare the scales, ancient scales, and one will probably come across few very surprising findings which we all need to develop for greater understanding. With these words, thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for really taking time out for Knowledge India Visitors Program and for interacting with the audience. This really reiterates your commitment to the subject. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin with the plenary session 1 in just a few minutes from now. बाहर है शायद. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to plenary session 1 in the Knowledge India Visitors Program. We have with us on stage Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe, President ICCR. Shri Kumar Tuhin, DG ICCR, will be joining us. I request Professor Ganti Surya Narayana Murthy, National Coordinator of the Indian Knowledge System, to kindly take his place on the stage. Before I request him to speak, a few words about him. Shri Ganti S. Murthy is a professor in biosciences and biomedical engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Indore. He is the national coordinator for the Indian Knowledge Systems of Ministry of Education, Government of India. He is also the founding head of the Center for Indian Scientific Knowledge Systems at IIT Indore. I request Professor Ganti Surya Narayana Murthy to kindly make his presentation on the government's approach on promoting Indian knowledge system.
We will look at it from here.
मातृभ्यो नमः, पितृभ्यो नमः, gurubhyo नमः, sabhaye नमः, sabhapatibhyascha namo नमः. A very warm good morning to all of you here, and it's my great pleasure to be speaking in front of you all and talking about the wonderful work that the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara Vibhaga, or the Indian Knowledge Systems Division of the Ministry of Education, is doing for the last few years. And I'll start off with basically, why is it that Indian knowledge systems is relevant, and talk about its relevance. And if you look at really the existential crises that we are facing today, whether we talk about that in the increasing inequalities, economic inequalities around the world, or sure, no, that's fine. Yeah. So, or if we talk, oh, maybe I think we'll. So whether we talk about healthcare systems that have become so impersonal that there is a complete disconnect between the patients and the healthcare system, and it doesn't work for majority of the poor around the world. Or whether we are talking about the intellectual property rights, the patenting regime, which again has its own significant problems. And whether we are talking about environmental degradation, issues like climate change, and the tragedy of the commons, of the global commons. All of those things, when you look at it, are really existential crises. Then the question naturally arises, is there a way that is different from the current perspective that we are looking at the world? And really, it's all about perspectives. Why? Because we are in this situation because we had one particular worldview, and it's important to at least equip ourselves with different tool sets, different perspectives, so that, as Einstein said, we cannot solve the problem with the same mindset that created it. Therefore, it is always important to have fresh perspectives. And that is where we think that Indian knowledge systems can help, because this accumulated wisdom of several millennia can provide us some pointers to look at the world in a different way and help make the world a better place for everyone. And therefore, so first principle, as you know, as Panchatantra says, first do no harm. Whatever we try to come up with, we need to ensure that we are not going to create more problems. And when we talk about the Indian knowledge systems in such a big way, what does it really encompass? It's a lot of words there, but I want to define it because it's such a broad category of knowledge systems that have been developed in India for several millennia. We don't even know the beginnings, which are lost in the mists of time. So when you think about it, it's basically what we talk about as a jnana, the knowledge, vijnana, experiential knowledge, and the jivana darshana, the outlook of life of the people of Bharat, continuously arising out of deep experience, observation, experimentation, and rigorous analysis, with a tradition of validating and putting it into practice in various domains, whether we talk about education, arts, administration, law, justice, jurisprudence, manufacturing, health, commerce, which is actually documented in classical and other languages of Bharat and has been transmitted through textual, oral, artistic, and family traditions. So when we say Indian knowledge systems, we are not making, as per the tradition of Bharat, we are not making any difference between what is called as a Desha and Marga Paramparas, or the tribal and the Shastra Paramparas. We see them as the same thing. So they're all incorporated into that. It's a broad classification with which we work at the Indian Knowledge Systems Division. What does it really provide? I mean, if you look at the IKS, what it provides you is a holistic, multidisciplinary and innovative approach, and its unique Bharatiya Drishti. So I will just give you one example of Bharatiya Drishti and then go into this, which is essentially we are all familiar with. I come from a background of science and engineering. I'm a man of technology. So naturally I'll pick up some example in that domain. When we think about science, we think it's how rational it is and all that. But really, if you think about it, there are two aspects to science, rather three aspects to science. But the two important parts are the scientific methodology and the scientific philosophy. The methodology is really objective and it is the same everywhere. And these methods keep evolving. But the outlook, the principles on which the science comes out is actually a product of the civilization where that has been developed. So for example, if I have to give you an example of mathematics, so you can look at Eulerian mathematics, or basically the kind of mathematics that has come from Greek, which is essentially axiomatic approaches, versus the algorithmic approaches of Bharatiya Ganita. You can broadly think about it that way. So, of course, we are not talking about pseudoscience here. As Karl Popper said, it has to be falsifiable. So that is the basis of what we are talking about. We are talking about principles that have come up based on the civilizational outlook. It is very, very clear when you look at it from a allopathy and Ayurveda perspective. When you look at a human body, for example, if I have to describe it using allopathic paradigm, it's a vast worldview. I'm not saying one is right, one is wrong. I'm trying to say there are two perspectives. Why is that important? Because having multiple perspectives will help us solve the problems of the world. And that is what I'm trying to emphasize here. And what does allopathy look at? So we look at body, we look at systems like digestive system, nervous system. Then we go into individual organs. We say stomach, intestine, small intestine, large intestine, things like that. Then we get into the cells. Then we get into the molecules. So it's essentially a reductionist paradigm. And then, whereas if you look at Ayurveda, it's a much more systemic approach which talks about Pancha Mahabhutas as the basis, of which the Tridoshas are the three main elements, which balance of which is defined as a health. And that's essentially how we really talk about health in Ayurveda. And then this is not something that is unfamiliar to modern science also. I mean, for example, it's basically, if you look at science, ultimately what Vaisheshika says is really true. It's essentially about classification. And when you look at classification of different things, phenomena or objects, we can do that using two approaches. One is called a analytico-synthetic or faceted classification, which is suitable for complex systems, is typically will have a short list of categories, but is exhaustive. Whereas if you go to enumerative classification, it is a long list of things. It is a non-exhaustive thing. Just to give you an example, if I say, list all the diseases that are possible, that would be an enumerative thing. And that list would never be complete. So for example, I mean, we had COVID. That was a new disease that came in the world. So we don't know what else is going to come. So that list is never going to be complete. That is the allopathy approach. What is an Ayurveda approach? Ayurveda approach is to say it is a disbalance of one of the doshas. There is an imbalance between the three doshas. So, when a Ayurveda Vaidya says that I can treat COVID, it is not because it was written in Shushruta Samhita or Charaka Samhita 2500 years ago. It is because their paradigm allows them to treat COVID using their analytico-synthetic classification process, which is essentially where they defined, I think it as a Vata, Kapha, Jvara or things like that, and then treated it. And this was actually documented in India, more than 3,000 cases of Ayurveda physicians who have treated COVID patients using their own traditional framework. It is just a different framework. Even think of chemistry. So it's not that this framework is unique to Indian knowledge systems. Such frameworks exist in modern science also. Just to give you another example, if I ask you to list out all the possible molecules that you can make, that are made, that you can find in the universe, that list is an enumerative classification. That is never going to be exhaustive, because you can always find some other molecule. But on the other hand, if I say, tell me the elements that the universe is made of, all you have is about 140, 150 elements in the periodic table. Maybe you'll find a few more, but that's about it. That's how the whole universe will be made of, those elements, those atoms. Those kinds of atoms. That's a synthetic, faceted classification, analytico-synthetic method of classification. Biology uses same. The linear method of classification is something similar. So there are things like that. So essentially, the point I'm trying to make is that it provides a unique perspective. This is kind of a unique perspective that you can get. Even you can look at food like this, for example. You can look at food as, from a biochemistry point of view, you can say it has proteins, carbohydrates, fats and all that stuff, or you can look at it from an Ayurveda perspective, where you can say what kind of shadrasas, what is the virya, vipaka of the food, what is the influence of mind and things like that. For example, why is this important? If you look at it from a very purely biochemistry point of view, it is very difficult to say why I like chocolate. Because I can eat chocolate, I feel good. There is no way I can fit it into that framework, but I can fit it using the Ayurveda framework, because it says influence on the mind. That is one of the perspectives that this knowledge system provides. This is why it is unique. This is why it is valuable. Not because this is superior, or inferior to anything else in the world. So this is something that I want to emphasize before I begin what we are trying to do. And same thing with Bhasma. And again, one final word on the methods itself. I said methods keep evolving. So for example, I can study the Bhasmas, which are used in Ayurveda and Siddha even more, from using the traditional methods that are described in Ayurveda, which are talking about Varitara, how do you really look at Slakshatmam and all that. Or you can also use the transmission electron microscopy, scanning electron microscopy, all of those things as well to study the same thing, but using the same framework of Ayurveda or allopathy. You can do that either ways. So what I'm trying to say is methods can keep evolving. Principles are much more important there. And these are the three things I just wanted to again mention, that Indian knowledge systems provides a unique perspective. That is the Bharatiya Drishti. It is multidisciplinary, inherently multidisciplinary in its approach, holistic in its approach, and unique and innovative. I'm not going to get into all of the details there because we can have that discussion later. But essentially, the point I'm trying to make is that it is something that is valuable to be conserved. Because if we don't understand the value of something, there is no way we'll conserve it. So that was the point I wanted to make. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but still, just wanted to make my spiel. So what is that the Indian Knowledge Systems Division does? This division was established in June 2020 because NEP talks about the rootedness in India in a big way. And as a consequence of a lot of churning, intellectual churning that happened in the country, the Ministry of Education felt that in order for us to incorporate the rootedness of in India, to decolonize the Indian education system a little bit, it is important for us to incorporate this rootedness, and the best way to do that is by bringing in the Indian knowledge systems into the education system. And therefore, there was a dedicated independent division that was set up in the Ministry of Education in June of 2020. And then basically the division was strengthened with national coordinator and a coordinator in October 2021, which was when I joined. And then we prepared a project report. And it was 2021, not November 2021, not 2022. We took a month to do it, not a year and a half to do that. And then right now we have, I have a team of 4 coordinators, 4 research fellows, and 4 staff, and myself, and a wonderful team and a pleasure to work with. So it's a really good team to work with. And what is it that we do? So the vision of the IKS division is to rejuvenate and mainstream Indian knowledge systems for the contemporary world. It is for the contemporary world that we are talking about. So there are 3 things that we emphasize on regardless of what we do. The first one is the drishti, the unique perspective that makes this knowledge system Indian. So if I want to call mathematics Indian mathematics and differentiate it from the Greek or basically Euclidean mathematics, I need to be able to articulate what is it that makes this mathematics Indian? What is it that makes this chemistry Indian chemistry, if I have to call it? So that is essentially something that we talk about, that perspective, the drishti. Second thing is the parampara, because these are knowledge systems that have been transmitted for several millennia, whether it be textual traditions or oral traditions or through family guilds and practices, it has been transmitted over several millennia. How is it that we are looking into that? And that is something that we want to emphasize. And then when we talk about parampara, it is important to note that it is not simply something that stays constant. It is something that keeps evolving with times. There are additions, deletions, and that keeps going. Therefore, this also means that we need to be taking that knowledge traditions and then transferring them to the future generations as well. So there is a connect between the past, present, and the future that we need to build. And that is what that parampara is about. And then finally, as the Veda says, not even a mudha or even a fool will work for something without a prayojana. So we always talk about the prayojana. And given the context of the world we are in, we want to talk about the laukika prayojana. We don't talk too much about the adhyatma prayojana. We talk about the laukika prayojana. What is it that we can get practical utility of this knowledge system for this contemporary world, for our future? Not what we did in the past, not what we were, but what we are and what we can be. So it is essentially a future-looking kind of a division. And if I have to summarize it in one sentence, it is essentially, if you look at Indian knowledge systems right now, it is confined to manuscripts, scholars, and libraries. We want to bring it to laboratories. That is what we want to do. And how do we do that? Because we are in the Ministry of Education, the tool we have is to look at the massive education system in India. And then if we want to decolonize that, we need to bring in the education system that is traditional to India as well into the components. We are not talking about wholesale changing the education system. What we are talking about is making sure that this education is rooted in India as per the NEP 2020. What we are therefore doing is we are making strategic interventions at the school level, where we are trying to incorporate knowledge of India into the education system at school level, K to 12. And then at the undergraduate and postgraduate education, we are basically introducing IKS minors, various discipline-specific courses. For example, if I'm specializing in BA economics, let's say, or BCom, or BA in BCom in economics, then I will have to study what Arthashastra talked about as a special course. So therefore, I will be able to connect it to my discipline. If I'm doing a BSc in chemistry, bachelor's in chemistry, then I'll have to study what Bharatiya Rasayana Shastra talked about at least in 1 or 2 courses during my entire 4-year curriculum. This is something that we have introduced and through working with the UGC. So then similarly, we are working with AICTE, and all of this also requires training of the teachers, because a lot of us, especially in the STEM disciplines, are trained in our own disciplines, but we don't have either access to the text because of the language barrier or the terminology barrier. So we are trying to remedy that through various faculty training workshops, both by bringing traditional Sanskrit scholars into the contemporary education system and then taking contemporary faculty from the contemporary education systems, mainstream academia, into Sanskrit universities, Gurukulas, doing all of that exchange so that it is well integrated and that parampara can be maintained. And then we have internships, and we basically also have conduct national youth conferences. And then once these students are trained, it is important for us to keep the parampara alive. That means creation of the new knowledge. Therefore, it's important for us to do research. So we fund some research in terms of research proposals. There are these IKS centers, which is institution centers that we are building as centers of excellence across the country. And there is also a big issue these days where people will claim that Indians knew nothing about science or technology and we learned everything from the West. Or on the other hand, we'll have people claiming that there is string theory in Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are absurd claims, and therefore there is a need for making sure that we have authentic knowledge that is actually validated with the scholars, presented in a proper way to not just scholars, but also to the common public. This is something that we are building by making sure that there is an IKS wiki that we are already in the works. It will be announced very soon. It will be launched publicly very soon. And then a lot of scholars face major issues in terms of access to manuscripts and other resources. This is something that, again, we are working on by collaborating with various libraries, not just in India, but also we are trying to now, maybe with your help, we'll also try to look abroad as well, because I know that there are a lot of manuscripts in Germany, in UK, for example, and a lot of European libraries have wonderful collection of the manuscripts. So we would like to make sure that this is really the heritage of the world, not just of India, because that represents the collective wisdom of several millennia. We want to make sure that it is accessible to all the scholars like you. And then we also do a lot of outreach activities. So in the last 1.5 to 2 years, we have established about 62 centers. We have funded something around, basically, we wanted to fund about 184 projects. We have funded 88, 5,000 plus internships, and we've done several FDPs, text mining and authentication, where we are really looking into the texts and all that. We have done quite a number of them there. And digital conservation effects, where we are using the AR and VR technologies to recreate some of the monuments, and then bringing the modern technologies to basically attract the youth so that they can be more connected with the Indian knowledge systems. We also do a lot of hands-on workshops, for example, where we teach the Bharatiya Lipis to scholars, and we teach how to make astronomical instruments, for example, for direct observational astronomy. We teach basically how do you really write proposals in multidisciplinary context, and so on and so forth, multiple things like this. And basically MOOCs courses. We have made 4 documentary films. We have made 2. 2 are under production right now. One focusing on India's educational heritage, and we'll be happy to play that here for the delegates. And also another one on India's water resources, the traditions of water conservation, water resource management in India, and many specialized projects. We're also looking at the ICCR on the influence of world. We had 2 very small discussion groups with basically ambassadors of Southeast Asian countries recently. And then we also conduct thematic workshops, annual symposiums, and so on and so forth. I mean, we do a lot of such events, but essentially all of that goes back to that initial thing that I was talking about. This is the real plan that we do. Now, these are some of the things that I was talking about, the outreach activities. That's like a Brihadishwaralaya, the 3D printed model of Brihadishwaralaya, where not just that, but you also can walk around it in a virtual reality, this framework. There is augmented reality. We are popularizing a game called Snakes and Ladders that you are familiar with. That is a deracinated, scrubbed version of what originally was called as a Rajju Sarpa game, which again you'll find it online on your Play Store as well. We are releasing it in 8 languages, and these are things that we have done with the Ministry of Culture. We have done events called Dhara, which essentially Dhara means again a flow, because that represents the knowledge flow over millennia. We have done that on mathematics, India's contributions to mathematics, metallurgy, martial arts, Samudra Manthan, maritime traditions, Ayurveda, Sangeeta, Natya Shastra, music and dance traditions of India, and we have done a lot on agriculture traditions. This is again one more very, very important and close to my heart, being an ag engineer. Worldwide, we are facing issues of declining soil productivity. Today, we take it for granted that we have access to food on a day-to-day basis. Especially in the developed countries, the problem is worse. Nobody stores food beyond 1 or 2 days. We need access to markets on a continuous basis. But if you notice what FAO says, the world has only 90 days worth of food. So we are in a very precarious situation. A small shock, supply shock, we'll all be in trouble. And as some philosopher had said, the distance between civility and total anarchy is 8 meals. So we are really in a precarious situation. So we need to really think of how do we ensure that we have food for everybody, especially in the growing population, world of growing population and shrinking resources. So soil health is going to be a very important thing. And as a scientist, I have worked on some of the methods from Vriksha Ayurveda, and they are going to be very, very useful, not just for India, but for the entire world, and something we need to be thinking about. So there are a lot of such things we did with Ministry of Culture as well, because we need to really address the problems of the humanity. And these are some of the, again, the statistics there. You can see reach, pretty good reach, 22 states and 23 states and 24 cities plus covered. And so pretty good coverage in India. But till now we have been focused inward because this is what our mandate was. But I look forward to interacting with you all and then taking this forward to the global scale as well. And what is it that we are going to do in future? So that was essentially a 3-year life of ICCR's division. Now we have got an extension for another 5 years. So what we will be focusing on is to rejuvenate and mainstream Indian knowledge systems for the contemporary world. That main goal has not changed. But as a sub-goal is to completely decolonize the Indian mind by generating interest and healthy critical reverence for the unbroken knowledge traditions of Bharata for the welfare of the world. So we are really thinking about the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and then saying how can India contribute to the world. And in that, I invite you all. And as we all know, as one of the commentary for Mahabharata says, how do we learn? Acharya padamadatte shishyam padam sumedhaya. We just learn 1/4 from our classroom lectures and 1/4 from our own effort. And then padam sa brahmacharibhya, 1/4 from our peers, peer learning. Padam kala kramena cha. It comes 1/4 comes with experience. So I look forward to interacting with you all and then taking this knowledge systems forward. And with that, I would like to thank you all for giving me a patient hearing, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions and take it forward. Thank you. Namaste.
I request Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe and the DG ICCR, Kumar Tuhinji, to kindly come on the stage. Dr. Sahasrabuddhe will just join us. Meanwhile, if there are any questions, you can kindly introduce yourself and ask them. The gentleman at the back and here. माइक लेकर कौन है यहाँ पर? माइक किसके पास है? और ऊपर भी माइक दे दीजिए प्लीज.
Good morning. My name is Jacob de Rover. I'm from Ghent University, Belgium. Now, I have a very basic question about the notion of Indian knowledge systems, because there's a peculiar asymmetry here. When you teach, say, Newtonian physics, you'd never call it British knowledge systems. When you teach quantum physics, you'd never call it German, Danish knowledge systems, or Western knowledge systems, or European knowledge systems. Even social science and humanities, we teach them as social science and humanities, not as Western knowledge systems. So don't you think the entire notion itself accepts a colonial framework of asymmetry, where you have to say, well, we have also contributed something, and call it Indian knowledge systems, as though it's dependent on the fact that it comes from a particular nation state or even cultural region?
Thank you for asking that question, because it is a very important one to address head on. So yes, I do agree, in an ideal world, we would not be calling this Indian knowledge systems, we would be calling it as a knowledge system. But we don't live in an ideal world. There is a legacy of colonialism in India. We have that colonial legacy, which unfortunately did not give India the due that this knowledge systems, the due that they really deserved. So there is an important thing to actually place that on the record and then put it as what is the contribution of this kind of a knowledge system? Because that is essentially what the approach is. Maybe if as this becomes mainstream, because that is essentially what our goal is as well, to mainstream, rejuvenate and mainstream the knowledge traditions of India, then we will not require this thing maybe 50 years down the line. And that is a day I would like to see sooner than later. Thank you.
Gentleman here. Mic लेकर कौन आ रहा है, please?
There is a gentleman right there. I guess you had raised your hand. Which one? Right there. Yeah.
Thanks for a wonderful talk. My name is John Wardle. I'm from Southern Cross University in Australia. My area is usually Indian traditional health systems. But actually, one of the things you very eloquently put across is just the importance of Indian knowledge systems in things like soil health, engineering. We have a regenerative agriculture program, for example, at our university. We do water conservation. We've got people like me saying, have you thought about how traditional knowledge owners have actually used this? But it's not something that people outside the converted that are already interested in Indian traditional knowledge systems may think about. How would you recommend someone like me actually try and work with my university to get our engineering department, our regenerative agricultural programs thinking about this more deeply?
More interactions, I guess, because this is something that we have recently established a center in specifically on the Vriksha Ayurveda and in GB Pant Agricultural University in Pantnagar, where we have the scholars trained in both the traditional methods who can understand Sanskrit and the modern, basically agricultural methods, doing experiments, crop plot studies and publishing in peer-reviewed papers to show the effectiveness of these methods. Not just some knowledge that was read in the text and that's about it, but actually something that was demonstrated practically. And we really focus on that kind of a thing. And then once you, I'll just tell you one of my experience that I had. I used to teach at Oregon State before coming back to India. And there in Eastern Oregon, which is a very drought-prone area, so there is something called infiltration galleries, which basically is for infiltration, managing the water into the groundwater. So basically, how do you recharge groundwater aquifers? So there I took my class of 30 kids to this demonstration of infiltration galleries, and this was a guy from Colorado, I guess. I mean, and we were talking about this and beautifully explained the entire thing. And I said, where did you get this thing from? This is a beautiful system. He said he learned it in Chennai, in India. He came here for a workshop and then they learned and then they're practicing it in Eastern Oregon. So which I think, what that basically calls for, I'm not saying this is only one-way exchange. I'm trying to say that this is a two-way exchange of knowledge that happens all across the world. And we need to encourage that. So my proposition would be to please put your people who are in the engineering departments who are working on regenerative agriculture and things like that in touch with us. We'll be more than happy to connect with scholars. And when scholars speak to each other in their own language, they understand much better and they will connect much better. That would be my proposition. Thank you.
Can we have the mic?
Namaste, sir. I am Sunil Sunkara from the Sangeet Natak Academy. And what you said about the Drishti, Laukik Prayojana, and the Parampara in between. So while the artistic traditions usually, since our language across the world has become English now, sometimes we find this difficulty in transferring terms. An example would be our main rasa of all dance, Shringar. Moment we translate it as erotic sentiment, it creates a different vision in the viewer and in the reader, often in books. So I wanted to know that through the IKS division, and since there are people from so many languages here, is there any work being done on this? How do we transfer our the terminology in the correct way across?
Thank you for asking that again, very relevant question. I mean, right now, the way that we are all speaking in English, and that's the reality. And English is a very wonderful language in the sense that it has borrowed words from many, many cultures and languages. And therefore, what we are trying to do is we're not trying to change or translate that into some framework, because again, what happens is if you're trying to translate, then you need that perspective, and which may not be there in the language that English, civilization that English has originally arisen from. So for example, if I have to translate dharma, you cannot translate it into religion. We all know that. Similar things, if you want to translate the concept of papa, you can translate it into sin. But then the moment I talk about punya, there is no equivalent word in English. So there are words for which there is no translation available. For those things, especially the technical terms, we would like to retain them as they are and then give the explanation in English. And that is because English is such an accepting language, there should be no problem in saying Shringara Rasa is being performed now. And that's basically the approach that we are taking.
Thank you, sir.
I'll just add one sentence. Everybody knows, languages are the vehicles of culture. And therefore, not in every culture, you will find similar traditions, perhaps. And therefore, while English we may find English wanting insofar as certain concepts to be translated are concerned, as he rightly mentioned it, it is equally true about Indian languages, for example. The term management, loosely we translate as Vyavasthapan. But management has many more other things also. It is not just Vyavasthapan. So, likewise, languages have their strength, but they have their limitations as well.
Thank you so much, Vinayji, for adding that. Thank you.
We have a question here.
Thanks for your inspiring talk. Chris Kessler from Charité Medical University, Berlin, Germany. And when it comes to research on traditional Indian systems of medicine in Europe and in Germany, for example, we face a complete different ground reality regarding the legal framework, the regulatory framework, etc., etc. And we face a lot of barriers and skepticism. And looking back at the last 15 years of being involved in clinical research on Ayurveda and yoga, I have, to put it diplomatically, felt that we haven't seen enough flexibility from our Indian partners in supporting this sort of battle, I would call it, because, you know, we cannot expect within European countries to receive massive support from official sides, from conventional ministries when it comes to traditional medicine research, you know, involving traditions, incoming traditions that are not native European. So, for example, Ayurveda or also traditional Tibetan medicine, etc., etc. And it has been very difficult at top-level universities to implement senior research exchange programs, to implement chairs, etc., etc. There are templates, there are programs, but, you know, it has been almost impossible, you know, to put them actually into place. And the whole community, the academic community within the EU and in Germany, I can just say, is really longing for more Indian support, because we really need you, since, you know, at least I don't expect major support, you know, from the you know, from the national level. So, and I think that would be extremely helpful to, if we could find more flexible solutions, you know, to put in place what you are advocating for is more research. But, you know, there's this dictum, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, or, you know, when in Delhi, do as the Delhiwalas do. So, yes, thank you.
So that's a complicated problem, because, I mean, even, I would say, even in India, the Ayurveda is not on the same level platform. I mean, the traditional medicine, even in India, is not in the same platform as the modern medicine is in India. So there are challenges even in India that Ayurveda Vaidyas face. And this is a challenge that we all need to work together. And I think with, you know, take the liberty to say that with the collaboration with ICCR, we will probably come up with something. And this is essentially one of the first steps in that right direction, I guess.
And there is a there is a catch in the entire system. I mean, in India, we always take up a kind of democratic approach and we say, let 1,000 flowers bloom. But when you say, let 1,000 flowers bloom, you don't find a system within them. And knowledge traditions, especially that have evolved in the western part of the globe, appreciate system. And there is nothing wrong about it as well. But then there is nothing wrong at this side when people say, let 1,000 flowers bloom. So it's a tug of war. As you rightly said, flexibility will have to be there from both the sides. And we need to be appreciating that a part of the truth is there and here as well. Perhaps that is the only way, agreeing to disagree on certain counts. But let the agreement area be a little wider in the, I mean, with the passage of the day. I mean, one can only hope.
From Eastern University of Sri Lanka, but in your first slide regarding the Ayurveda and the Western sector, I not the questions, but the value addition for that one, because it is very good presentation. In that point of view, that biological humors, that means that Tridadu, dosha is the pathological, sadhu is the physiological. So based on your explanation, you have divided the parts of the body from the Western sector. In here, that Panchabhuta and trihumors, biological humors. Based on that, our diagnostic perspective is physiological. Western diagnostic perspective is anatomical. That is the main concept that audience also should know based on your presentations. On the other hand, regarding the knowledge system in India knowledge system, they said that Western, they didn't say about that Western knowledge system. It's okay, but each and every ethnics have the knowledge system. That from the ancient system to here, even Sri Lankan also we have, but we ancient time that we were the part of the India, the Sri Lanka, but we have some specific uniqueness in India. So in the way, all have to develop the knowledge system from ancient to here, but the common word knowledge is common for all over the world, but that is obvious, but have to be developed for the ancient time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for helping me again clarify that even better, saying physiological and anatomical differences. Thank you for that input. And then in terms of this one, I totally agree with you that although we are part of the same civilizational continuum, there are unique aspects to Sri Lanka that makes it Sri Lanka as a nation. There are similar things about every nation, every culture that actually makes them unique. And those need to be taken forward. Because, I mean, in India, we say we really are looking, as Professor Dr. Sahasrabuddhe was saying, let 1,000 flowers bloom. So that's the spirit. Ma'am, I think you had a question.
Yeah.
The mic is coming to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Professor Moti, thank you very much for your lecture. It was really interesting and covering very many different points of vantage about the Indian implementing the Indian knowledge systems. I have a very practical question to you. My name is Halina Marlewicz. I am from Jagiellonian University in Krakow. On one of the slides, you have shown us a conceptual map of implementing, if I remember well, this Indian knowledge system knowledge in education. And you called it interventions. And since I'm not native to English, I just wanted to ask, what does actually intervention mean? Is it practical for you? Are you trying to implement the knowledge in some practical way now? And if you do so on many different levels of school and higher education, and if you do so, how do you do that? In the sense of whether it is being included into the present curricula, so are you going to reform this educational system? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So by interventions, I do mean something that is getting incorporated into the curriculums and outside the curriculums as well. So that means essentially it becomes the part of the mainstream knowledge that any child acquires by the time that they graduate class 12 or they graduate a bachelor's or a master's degree, not just through the academic system, but also from the other venues outside the classroom as well. So right now, there is a huge exercise going on in implementing the National Education Policy 2020, where there is an entire look at all the subjects at all levels that everybody is looking at to make it much more modern, because the last time we had it was around 35 years ago, the National Education Policy, and then we revised our curriculums in 2005. So it's been a while. Now the world has changed quite a bit, so we want to make it more modern and more contemporary for this world. So this is something that the Education Ministry is doing a massive exercise on, starting at foundational or preschool level, all the way up to the UG, PG levels and postgraduate, undergraduate and postgraduate levels. And so there is a massive overhaul of the education system. So there, what we are trying to do is we are trying to make sure that our children know about the Indian knowledge systems and these perspectives in their curriculum and then outside their curriculums as well through various activities and things like that. Just like we teach about the health from this perspective, the biochemistry will teach all of that. We'll also teach them about, see, this is also a way of Ayurveda, how Ayurveda looks at things, or things like that. I mean, so when we talk about Fibonacci series, the mathematical series that is known as Fibonacci series, actually it was, normally people call it as Hemachandra series because Hemachandra was 200 years before Fibonacci. But actually it is Veerahanka who was even earlier. So it should be called Veerahanka series. And then where do all of these things come from? Essentially it comes from Chanda Shastra, from music, from Shloka. So we want to bring that innovative pedagogy as well as teach them about all of these things while we are not compromising on the quality of the education, because the goal of our education system overhaul is to make sure that the India's education system is second to none in the world. So we want to make sure that those changes are happening. There we are bringing in these content and activities so that the child as a graduate becomes rooted in India, and that's basically what we are talking about. I'm sorry for using some complicated words there. My apologies.
Any other questions?
Questions or suggestions as well?
Yes, suggestions, please. I know you all have vast experience. So,
We have the
yeah.
gentleman in front.
And this is an evolving department. It is for the first time that such a department is established. So your suggestions are also welcome.
I'm from Ireland. We have a primary and secondary school where we teach Sanskrit. My question is different. It has to do with, have you heard of the non-dig policy in agriculture, where people are not plowing land anymore? This is a new method. It's called non-dig method.
Oh, yeah, no-till. No-till
yes.
and
Yeah,
conservation agriculture. Yes, heard about it.
I go to Gurukula in Bangalore, and I met many farmers there, and they would think that would be a crazy thing to do, that you must plow your land. And because they're not aware that this is actually a better system, better organic vegetables can be grown much better without this. So are there actually, in the Indian knowledge systems, is there evidence of that sort of knowledge?
So, so there are. In fact, what we call as organic agriculture, or what we call as natural farming and zero budget agriculture, these are all permaculture, these are all different variants of different methods of how do you really take care of soil while producing enough food from that soil. So yes, people are aware of these kind of things, but it is not practiced to the extent that it is done. In fact, what has actually happened is, when we say till and no-till, so it again is a terminology that comes from the practices mostly in the Europe and US, because there they had tillage with the tractors. And so when you talk about tillage, it's either 12 inches or 18 inches deep. And that actually causes a lot of soil. It is required in the prairies, for example, because there the clod soil is very tough. But it is not required in India. In fact, there is a note that British officers wrote to England in 18th century, 17th and 18th century, which was curated by Dharampalji, where they actually say that the plows that they were importing from Europe were not suitable for India because they would break. And in fact, what Indians used to do was plow only till 5 centimeters, which is actually very good for a tropical country like India. If you till deeper, you actually lose soil organic matter, and it actually causes many more problems, which is kind of, for example, quite evident in Punjab these days and Haryana, causing all kinds of problems. And so basically, these are the costs of green revolution that we are paying right now. But essentially, that is something that we need to think about. So that is what has evolved. Even the Dust Bowl and all those things in 1930s and all, that was caused by over-tilling of the land. Then from then on, the conservation agriculture had started, where they were trying to have cover crops and all those things. Then the reduced till and no-till agriculture. So this again is something that people have figured out. I mean, see, people are wise everywhere. I mean, when we are trying to do things, we'll figure it out. The only thing is, can we benefit from the wisdom of the past? That's all. So yes, there are people, but not as many people using the zero tillage agriculture. They do till the land a little bit in the traditional practices. Sorry, that was a long answer, because you asked a question that is close to my heart. Yes, please.
Can we have the mic here, please?
I'm from National University of Mongolia. My name is Timbrel. You told the Indian knowledge system curriculum programs developed. Now our next generation really into the digital, living in digital age in artificial intelligence system. In my Sanskrit class, some of our students using artificial intelligence systems, ChatGPT, or meaning of Sanskrit words and some of meaning of grammatical information from ChatGPT. And what's your, the Indian knowledge system projects also adapt the, also connected with artificial systems for the distributing, teaching Indian traditional knowledge to next generation. Do you have such kind of the projects developing?
Thank you. I'll answer that question in two parts. Regarding the opportunities for children, students to learn and children to learn, we are actually creating very many specialized courses, discipline-specific courses that students can take, and all of them will be put online on the Swayam platform, which is a Government of India platform, which is open for everybody, free of cost, and anywhere in the world you can go and take the lectures delivered by some of the best experts of that subject. So we are curating about 70 to 100 courses in the next 1 year, and all of that will be available for you all to use. And these will be discipline-specific courses. It will be available on Swayam platform. We are also trying to create many more courses in that. And so that is part one. So it is, yes, the answer to that question, is it available? We'll make all the resources available online, and it will be free for anybody to take those courses. In fact, we are also coming up with a certificate course on Introduction to Indian Knowledge Systems, which we are going to develop in 8 languages, 10 languages actually, 6 of them Indian and 4 of them basically foreign languages like Arabic, Chinese, we are thinking of Spanish and English. 4 languages, international languages as well. We'll be doing that very soon. And right now we are in the production stage of that certificate course. And again, it will be available for anybody in the world to take up. And this is just a start, and we'll go for other languages as well. Now, coming to the second part of the question that you had asked about ChatGPT and then people using that. We see that in the classes. I mean, I face students where they will go and ask ChatGPT and they'll hallucinate something, and then I'll have to go through all of that. So yes, that is a issue. In fact, we had, when the ChatGPT came out, we had asked the community of scholars, traditional scholars, to interact with some IT experts and all, to check whether the ChatGPT, the answers that the ChatGPT gives, are in line with what the traditional thinking of the drishti of the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara is, Indian knowledge system says. Unfortunately, it is not so. We have found that out. And so the perspective is all Western, because the corpus, I mean, there is no surprise in that, because the corpus on which it was trained was all on Western and English, primarily English. When I say Western, I'm meaning primarily English. That is the other thing, is not considering even other languages like Spanish or basically even other languages in Europe and Portuguese and things like that. So that's something that concerns us, because unless you have that drishti, you can't really understand the world. You have to understand that worldview to be authentic in response. So we are trying to make some efforts in that direction, which are in very preliminary stages right now, but very soon we'll be able to do something about it. Thank you.
Any other suggestion?
Please,
in the corner.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the very good lecture, as well as excellent answers. Really appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just without further ado, myself, Professor Dr. Ibrahim from Malaysia, from University of Cyberjaya. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Traditional and Complementary Medicine. Okay, and thank you for the opportunity given here. Just 2 questions, sir. When we talk about system of medicine, so like you just curious to know like what our approach would be, whether to promote just a single system of medicine or to have an integrated approach. So whereby we acknowledge the strength and weaknesses of all those other modalities as well. So having an integrated approach kind. So number 1. And number 2, about our Indian languages. So where we are going to promote other Indian languages as well, such as Urdu or Tamil and others as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'll take the first question, whether the integrated approach is better. In fact, regulations are slow to catch up, but people already practice it. Please have a seat. So people already practice it. For example, in India, if you go, they may be going to the physician for getting some kind of a treatment for managing their blood pressure. They'll take some medicine, but then they will come home and then take the Karela juice. Because that's essentially because prescribed by the Ayurveda. You know, they have these kind of things that we already are. People are already making sure that the best things from all these things are practiced by them, because ultimately it is their health. And so we need to accelerate. In fact, we are slow from the regulator's point of view and even the academia point of view to some extent. And there needs to be more integrated approach, because we know that modern medicine has its strengths. It is effective. It is not that it is completely... Again, this is where I would remind myself again of what Mahakavi Kalidasa said in a kavya called Malavika Agnimitram. He says there, Puranamityeva nasadu sarvam nachapi kavyam navamitya madhyam santah pariksham chetarad bhajante moodah para pratyayinaye buddhihi. What that means is he was talking about, he's a poet, right? Mahakavi Kalidasa is one of the best poets in the world. And I would say he's the best poet in the world because I come from his region in Ujjain. So there he's talking about poetry. So he says, Puranamityeva nasadu sarvam. Just because something is old, it is not gold. We should not, because something is old poetry, we should not say it is the best. And we should not reject something because it is new. He says, Moodah para pratyayinaye buddhihi. Santah pariksham tyatarat bhajante. Santah means the wise. Pariksha antarat bhajante. So they only praise something after they do the pariksha or they examine something. Whereas the fools, Moodha, will be led by the opinions of others. So in the same thing, whether it is a modern medicine or whether we are talking about Ayurveda, whether we are talking about Siddha, or even the what we call as Natu Vaidya, the tribal medicine that is practiced, or many, many other traditions across the world. I'm not aware of all of them, but all of these have their utility. They have survived so long, as Nassim Nicholas Taleb says, basically, if something has survived so long, it is because it is resilient. It was useful for people, therefore they have preserved it. So all of these things we need to really learn from that, and essentially that integrated approach is very much needed. In fact, that's what I was trying to say, that society already practices it to a large extent. We are slow in catching up, both from a regulator's point of view and academia. We need much more integration and agility from our side than the societal side. They already know those things. Second thing, you talked about languages. So when we say Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, one of the things that we say is it exists in all Bharatiya Bhashas. Because 200, 300 years ago, we did not even know about English. Maybe there were hardly a dozen people in India who would know English. But then how did this knowledge system that enabled India to carry on this parampara continue for so many thousands of years? It was in Bharatiya Bhashas. And it is not limited to Sanskrit. For example, there is a language of Manipur called Meitei, where they have a manual written on architecture using bamboos. It's all in Meitei language. It's a small state of Northeast. It's called the Jewel of Northeast. There you have beautiful structures because bamboo is a resource that is available there, so they know how to make the structures. And that entire thing is made in written in Meitei. There is the famous Konark temple. Essentially, that was written. How do you construct that was written? The catalog of the daily wages that were paid, the contracts that were written, were all maintained in Odia. And there are actually palm leaf manuscripts on that. And then Dara Shikoh, for example, had written a book called Nuske Dar Fanni Falasat on agriculture in Farsi. So it is not that it is limited to one particular language. It exists in all Bharatiya Bhashas, and even those languages which do not have a script. So all languages. Thank you.
We can. So we'd like to thank Professor Ganti Suryanarayanamurthy for that very, very enlightening talk. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for lunch. The post-lunch session will begin at 2:30 in the afternoon. Thank you. Ji, welcome. Ji. That was fascinating.